All right, we're going to get started, so let me go ahead and pray. God, we thank you for your son, Jesus. We thank you for all the opportunities that we have in life because of him. Thank you for these people. Thank you for this space. God, I ask that you bless our conversation and our words tonight may be glorifying to you and edifying to everybody in this room. In Jesus' name, amen. So, last week we talked about anxiety. Tonight we're talking about depression. These two combined are what's called mood disorders. Mood just means emotions, okay? So when you are talking to anybody about what we're doing, what we're talking about, mood disorders are the most common reasons that people will walk into my office, okay? Anxiety, number 1, depression, number 2, PTSD, number 3, which we'll talk about next week. So that's what we're talking about is mood disorders. We live in a world that wants to convince children that somebody else is responsible for how you feel and you are responsible for how everybody else feels. Both of those are a lie. We are responsible for ourselves. We can't be responsible for something that we can't control. So tonight, some of the things that we're going to talk about might be a little bit triggering for some of you, okay? Last week, not so much. Everybody knows what anxiety is. We kind of just put up with it. Tonight, we're going to go a little bit deeper, and it's going to be a little tougher. And so some of the content, some of the things that we're talking about, some of the examples I might give might be a little triggering. If that's the case, do what you need to do. Stand up, take a few pacing laps around the back of the room, go outside if you need to, get a drink, whatever you need to do. That's totally fine. When we talk about this stuff, it gets challenging. And we don't always grow up in situations where we're taught or where we learn how to deal with this stuff appropriately. And especially in churches. Churches don't like to talk about these subjects. So I'm glad and humbled again that you guys are here, and I'm glad that Crossroads has allowed us to talk about this. Okay? So, let's get started. There are handouts on your table. Please don't jump ahead. Stay with me. I didn't know they were going to do that. So, this first couple of screens, I'm going to let you read them. I'm not going to read them out loud to you, okay? Part of dealing with depression is understanding the other person, the person who's dealing with depression, okay? When we look at somebody and they have depression and we say, oh, you just need to pray more, you just need to read your Bible more, you just need to stop sinning and all that hogwash. Is it good that people do that? Yes, but that's not why they're depressed. Okay? I want you to read what I put up on the screen, these next couple of slides, and try to identify with what the person is going through. Okay? It's like drowning, even though you know how to swim. We all know what that feels like. If you've been around water and you've struggled even for a moment, you know what that feels like. You don't control your thoughts control you. That's children. Children are slaves to their feelings, to their thoughts. They haven't learned yet how to control that, to have self-control over their thinking. Some people never grow out of that. It's feeling like you've lost something, but having no clue when or where you last had it. And then you realize the thing you lost is yourself. Depression is an unbearable load. We feel like the person suffering from depression feels like they can't carry it anymore. It's too much. They can't do it by themselves, and nobody will help them for whatever reason. And even when people around them, whether it's loved ones or just another person, a friend, wants to help them, the things they say are misinterpreted. You're against me. And you don't understand me. Now, not 100% of that is on either party. Both parties play a role. Okay? So when you're faced with somebody with depression and all they do is come at you with attacks, understand where they're coming from. They feel like you don't understand them, and they feel like you're against them for whatever reason. And they may think that about every person on the planet. But that's where they're at. Now, my job is to dig into that with people and understand where they're coming from and why they think and feel the way that they do. That is not your job. Your job is to be there for them, to support them, to listen to them, to validate them. Yeah, when crappy things happen in your life, you should be down about that. Validate them. Yep, makes sense. You are absolutely right. That sucks. That sucks is the most common phrase I use in my office. And it's amazing sometimes when you just stop and listen to somebody and let them go and sit there and go, yep, makes sense. Because they're not used to people doing that. What are they used to? People coming up to them going, oh, you need to do this. You should try this. Or go see this person. I mean, they're not a psychiatrist or psychologist or a counselor or anything, but they can really help you. No. Put your hand on their shoulder, if they're okay with that. Put your hand on their shoulder and say, I get it. This is tough. Sorry you're going through this. How many of you have walked into church on a Sunday morning and it was the toughest day of your life and you didn't feel like you could say it to anyone? Don't raise your hand. This is not therapy group. Now, how many times, how many Sundays does that happen? And we don't even know about it. See, that's the thing. That's why I've been talking to Paul for months about this, is there are people hurting in our church services on Sunday morning every Sunday. And if we don't start as a church reaching out to those people and trying to identify them, help them, validate them, and be a support in any way possible, why would they turn to Jesus for anything? Why would they turn to their Christian community for help? There's your two reasons right there. You don't get me, and you just don't know. And that's why this is so important. These are the people sitting next to us, the person sitting in front of us, the person sitting behind us, the person we walk through in the lobby 3 times and they look sad, but we don't say anything. There's been times I've walked into church and it was one of the worst days of my life and I just didn't want to. So we plaster a smile on our face and say, how you doing? Oh, I'm doing good. How are you? Yeah, you know what good means? Guilty, overwhelmed, obsessed, and defensive. I got tired of people saying it. So I reinterpreted it for them. You know what fine means? I'll give you the clean version. Fouled up, insecure, neurotic, and emotional. You know what okay means? Only kidding. And if you want to be from the Midwest, it's only kidding and yelling. Alex got that. But this is who we're talking about tonight. And some of you sitting in this room, that might be you. And that might have been you for the last 5 years. This is who we're talking about tonight. And sometimes we just forget that it's painful. We get focused on trying to help in our way, not the way they're asking for or the way that they need. But we forget that it just hurts. And a little later, we're going to talk about feeling hopeless. And that's the thing we need to know, is that people suffering with depression are in pain. And we all know what pain feels like. So remember this chart from 2 Sundays ago. Biopsychosocial damage. There's one of your 3 big words tonight. Biopsychosocial damage can happen for a number of reasons in a person's life, and it can lead to suffering. So it could be both. And at the same time, the person could be involved in sin. So it could be all 3. What we're focused on tonight is suffering. Suffering is just an elongated period of time where nothing moves. It doesn't get better. It doesn't get worse. It sucks. It hurts. And I'm hopeless for it to ever change. That's what suffering is. If you don't have a theology of suffering, get one. If you don't have an understanding, a well-rounded, spiritually based understanding of suffering, get one. Read the book of Job to start with. Job took God on and said, "Why me, God?" And this is Todd's paraphrase of God's answer. "Why not you, and let me show you how big and powerful I am, because you don't get it." And he did. He showed Job in a multitude of ways, I am the Lord of the universe, and I made all of this, and I can make it all happen, and I can tear it all down again if I want to. And I love you so much that I want you to pursue me when life hurts. How many times do we encourage somebody to pursue God when they're hurting, in their hurt? I don't mean pray more. I don't mean read your Bible more. Pursue God. That's why he's there. He's there for us to pursue, because if we pursue him, our problems become smaller and smaller. If we allow God to change our thinking. If we get stubborn and we only want to think what we want to think, we're going to have problems. Now, like I said, sin can be involved as well. Oftentimes when somebody is suffering, it's really easy to fall to temptation. It's easy to sin. It's easier to sin. So be aware of that. But just because somebody's sinning, or they're suffering, or they have a truckload of trauma, damage, whatever you want to call it, from their past, it doesn't mean they're unrecoverable. It doesn't mean it's over. It means there's a lot of work to do and a lot of pain to sift through. So I introduced this concept last week, the 4 basic emotions. Tonight we're talking about sadness. Anxiety is fear. Depression is sadness. So before COVID hit, depression rates were at about 5%. 3.5% to 5.8%, depending on the study, depending on the population and the situation, but roughly 5%, okay? You could get it up to 8% if you really tweak the numbers, but it was mostly around 5%. Well, then COVID hit and blew it up. 25% to 40%, depending on the studies that you read. And some of that is still being dealt with. The suicide rates have stayed high. They have not come down very much. The depression rates are still elevated. They're back down to around 8%. So they're higher than they were, but they're a lot lower than 25 to 40%. When COVID was at its worst, right before the vaccines came out, so we're talking late 21, early 22. No, sorry, late 20, early 21, because the vaccines came out in March of 21. Depression was at its highest. Alcoholism was rampant. Liquor stores couldn't keep enough product on the shelves. It was crazy. And the phone at my office was blowing up. We couldn't answer the phone fast enough. We couldn't get people in fast enough. That has calmed down. People have gone back to work. Kids have gone back to school. But the remnants of all of that is still swirling around. And a lot of it is coming out through depression. Twice as prevalent in females as it is in males, and more prevalent at younger ages. So children have the highest rates, teenagers next, then young adults, and then lower and lower by the age group. I expected, when I dug into some of the statistics, I expected to see a spike after retirement age. There's a lot of evidence for that. When people get older and they lose some productivity, they start to despair about their life. Maybe the numbers aren't as big as I expected. Okay, fine. It's still an issue. So, symptoms of depression. These first three are right out of the book. The book that I have to use when I do diagnostics with people, these first three are right out of the book. A depressed mood is feeling sad, irritable, or empty. Okay, you're just feeling down. Okay, but that's not enough, but it's a lot. Here's the kicker. Irritability, a lot of times when somebody's angry, especially teenagers or adults, they're depressed. But how many people walk down the street and say, oh, I'm depressed. Here's my medications I take. No, they don't do that, so they cover it with anger. Get out of my way. I don't like what you said. Whatever it is. That's depression. Okay, fine, maybe they have an anger problem too. But it's depression. If you dig into it enough and you find enough, it's there. Loss of pleasure or interest in activities, that has to be there for a diagnosis of depression to qualify. Okay? They have to have lost interest in things. And for most of the day, nearly every day for at least 2 weeks. 2 weeks minimum. Now, it could be years, but at least 2 weeks. Most of the day, nearly every day. Okay? Poor concentration, feelings of guilt or low self-worth, hopelessness about the future, thoughts about suicide, sleep disruption, changes in appetite or weight, and low energy. Okay? Those are the symptoms. Now, we're going to talk more about this next week. But last week we talked about anxiety. This week we're talking about depression. Anxiety and depression can show up as an extension of PTSD or trauma. So the genesis of the whole thing could be trauma, but lived out day to day, it could look like either anxiety or depression or a combination of the two. So just because you're seeing somebody who looks depressed doesn't mean that's the core problem. And again, that's not your job. That's my job, to go find the core problem. But understand that if you're dealing with somebody with trauma, but to you, you're looking at depression every day, the trauma is going to complicate a lot of stuff. It's going to complicate communication. It's going to complicate definitions. Misinterpretations are going to be all over the place. A lot of stuff is going to be different. It's not going to be what I would call straight out of the box depression. Okay, so the more complicated the history gets, the more complicated the presentation looks. And you got to tease all those things apart. You don't have to, I do. Okay? Now, there are 4 different types of depression that we're going to talk about tonight. Okay? These are 4 major categories. Little pieces of slices of depression will fit into these. Like postpartum depression would fit under this first category, situational. Okay? A situational depressive episode is a period of feeling down that's temporary. There's a decrease in the enjoyment of activities, and it is generally a healthy or normal response to an adverse situation. You lose your job, a loved one, somebody gets sick, something bad happens in the family. Now, these seasons of down mood are proportional in intensity and duration to the triggering event. Okay? So somebody loses a job, they're going to feel down about it for a while. When I lost a job right after we moved here to Montana, I was moping around the house for a while, a number of days, and I looked at my wife and I said, why did God bring us here if he knew this was going to happen? I have my Job moment, okay? And she looked at me with her wonderful face, the way she does, and she goes, Todd, God had to dangle your dream job in front of you to get your family where he wanted them. And I go, oh, okay. Went into private practice the next day. That was my moment. I was mopey. It wasn't fun. I didn't want to get out of bed. I didn't want to take a shower. I didn't want to eat. I was bummed out, down, depressed. We all go through that, even if it's for a couple of days. We all know what that feels like. So that's situational. Next one, major depressive episode. This is the big dog. Disrupts life to a degree that is greater than the triggering event, or there is no triggering event. Okay? It's not just, I'm down about this thing that happened. I am so down that it doesn't match. The level of disruption is not commensurate with or congruent with the event. It's bigger. Okay? Mere passing of time does not provide relief, and belief, behavior, health objects or stuff feeding the depression and professional help is required. Okay? So this is a much bigger slice of depression. A lot more going on here. A lot more disruption. A lot more moving parts. Okay? Seasonal affective episode. We love this one here in Montana. How many of you have your little grow lights at home? Okay, those are popular. Vitamin D, D3. You could chew that stuff up by the bottle. Okay, we know about this one here in Montana because of our long, cold, dark winters. Sun goes away in December and it doesn't come back up until March. My wife, born and raised in Southern California and Arizona, loves it, he said with sarcasm. So, this is usually brought on by a change in seasons, especially winter. It's also unclear how changes in amounts of sunlight, routine, activity level changes, circadian rhythms, and all that kind of stuff. It's unknown. They're still doing tons of research on this stuff, how all of that affects this as well. Okay? Peer support is strongly recommended. One of the best things, somebody with seasonal affective disorder, that's the popular name for it. Notice it says SAD, S-A-D. One of the best things they can do is reach out to their peer support network, friends to talk to on the phone. Let people know that you're a little down about the clouds, okay? It really helps to talk about it, okay? Montanans aren't going to think you're weird. You call somebody in California, they're going to think you're weird, okay? So keep that in mind. And you should probably see your physician just to make sure something else bigger isn't going on, okay? Because throughout all of this stuff, and my wife wanted me to make sure to mention this, throughout everything that we know about depression and dealing with it, there's a lot of stuff that impacts depression that we don't even think of. Let me give you an example. This table over here has cookies. Y'all got to step up your game. They got cookies, okay? Chocolate is not good for depression. I hate that because I like chocolate. Okay? Chocolate's not good. Sugar is not good for depression. Okay? Sugar is an inflammatory. Guess what happens when that gets around a nerve? How much weight does it take to close a nerve in your body? The weight of a dime will shut off 90% of the signal in a nerve. And a dime on your finger doesn't weigh very much. So a little bit of inflammation in your body goes a long way to shut things down. There is more and more, and I want to go take a class and get certified in this, but there's more and more research coming out that the food we eat, the things we put in our body, has a massive impact on not just inflammation, but other body systems and brain function. So we're not doing ourselves any good when we start emotional eating when we're down. And I do that too with chocolate, especially Reese's peanut butter cups. It's the best thing on the planet. So, fourth one, bipolar episode. Bipolar is that the going back and forth between manic episodes and depressive episodes, okay? Or you can have just one of those. So depressive symptoms interspersed with manic symptoms that feel pleasurable but can be destructive. When somebody is in a manic bipolar state, they are on cloud 9 and they think they're Superman, literally. So when the lows come, when the depression comes back, they think there's something wrong with them and they're not doing enough. They're not working hard enough. They think all they got to do is get their motor going a little bit more and it'll come back. But that's not how it works. Often in a predictable time frame or cycle, and learning how to manage mood and energy fluctuations is essential for a healthy life and healthy relationships. Okay? I'm not going to ask for hands, but we probably all know somebody or know somebody who knows somebody who has bipolar. And you probably know how destructive that can be in their own life, but in the lives of people around them. Okay? It often involves drugs or alcohol and really destructive behavior. Okay? So, what were the four? Situational, major, seasonal, and bipolar. Okay? That covers the vast majority of it. Okay? As I mentioned earlier, there are thinking problems that come along with depression. Okay? When somebody has depression, their view of the world around them and people and relationships gets warped. They start seeing things in a way that validates what they think and feel, but ignores reality. Okay? So that's what we're going to talk about right here. Beliefs that prolong depression are anything that minimize or dismiss the symptoms. Okay? And this is the thumbnail of it right here. We're going to get a lot deeper in just a minute. Oh, that's not a big deal. I can handle this. I'll just work a little harder. I can still handle everything. Now, wait a minute. If you've got real symptoms of depression, that's going to fall apart real quick. It's not a matter of willpower. Here's the problem with willpower. It eventually runs out. We don't have an infinite store of willpower. And I would offer this. If somebody is depending on their willpower to get through something, are they depending on God? No, they are not. I don't want people to think I'm weird. I don't want people to think I got problems, so I'm just going to pretend. I'm going to put my little smile on, and I'm going to pretend like everything's fine, even though I'm falling apart on the inside and I'm crying a river. Happens in my office. How you doing today? I'm good. I'm doing real good. 3 questions later, they're in a puddle of tears. They were faking it. Sometimes people go through life faking every day because they don't want people to think they're weird or weak. Weak's a big one, especially here in Montana. Whoops, too far. So, what are beliefs? Your beliefs guide everything that happens. I'm going to draw something on the board here in just a minute to show you this. But our patterns of thinking, feeling, and behaving are happening 1,000 times a day or more. We're always doing that. They can be positive or negative. If I have the belief that I'm creative and intelligent, great, that's the way God made me. But if I have the belief that I'm stupid, what am I going to do differently? These beliefs, good or bad, are created out of the memories and the events of the past. Okay? There are 5 components to every memory. Every memory we have has these 5 things in it. Okay? You ready? Triggers, images, cognitions or beliefs, emotions, body sensations. I will do those again. Triggers, or a trigger. An image could be moving or still. A cognition, which could be a belief, something we think. Emotion, at least one. And body sensations. TICES is the acronym. Every memory we have has those 5 components in it. Now here's the difference. Somebody without trauma, those are nice little packages stored in lockers all through our brain. Somebody who has trauma, they don't have lockers. They have spider webs, and every spider web intersects with every other spider web. So trauma embeds itself across memories. That's where you get a lot of mixed up memory of this thing happened and this thing happened at the same time. No, they didn't. They were 5 years apart. We're going to talk more about that next week. So these memories that are stored in our brain, we can pull them out and use them at any point in time, positive or negative. The middle one, cognition, which is thoughts or beliefs or anything that we can think, is the one we're talking about tonight. What we believe about ourselves and the world around us sets the stage for everything that happens. Okay? Let me give you an example. I like triangles. This is the thoughts, feelings, behavior triangle from cognitive behavioral therapy, which basically means change your thinking will change your behaviors. So we start with a thought, then we have a feeling about it, and then we do something. And sometimes because of what we do, we have another thought about what we just did and we do it again. You have a darker pen? I don't. Well, maybe. Let me see. Is that better? Well, Alex gave me the red one. I don't know. I told you I was going to blame everything on you tonight. So, thoughts, feelings, behavior triangle. Okay? First we have a thought, then a feeling, then a behavior. Feelings are simple. Mad, sad, glad, scared. Keep it simple. Okay? So, this happens 1,000 times a day or more. We're always doing it. Okay? You've been doing it multiple times since you sat down here tonight. Okay? But, here's the example. Let's say Mikey goes into school, 8th grader, goes into the classroom and the teacher says, pop quiz. And he goes, oh man, I suck at these. And he gets mad. And then he doesn't put a mark on the paper. What kind of grades is he going to get? Not a good one. What's his teacher and his parents going to think if they see that happening over and over and over? They're going to start lowering their expectations of Mikey. But what if Mikey's belief is, I'm stupid? If he believes he's stupid, how hard is he going to try on quizzes, tests, and homework? Not very hard, which means he's going to get what kind of grades? Not good ones. And when his teacher and his parents see that, what are they going to think? Lower and lower and lower expectations, right? But here's the problem. True story, by the way. Mikey has 140 IQ. Last year in 7th grade, he got straight A's. What happened? Well, over the summer between 7th grade and 8th grade, somebody said something. Not that he was stupid, but somebody said something that caused him to question his own intelligence. Maybe I'm not as smart as I think I am. I never thought about this before. So he started playing with it. Maybe I'm stupid. Let's find out. So he walks in the classroom. The teacher says, pop quiz. I hate these. Gets angry. And he doesn't put a mark on the paper. But he has 140 IQ. How many kids are doing that every day in school right now? A bunch. The beliefs that we have, positive or negative, drive everything that we do. What if his belief was, I'm intelligent? I'm God's masterpiece. I can figure anything out. He would do a lot of things different. That I'm stupid goes away, you replace a lot of stuff. So the beliefs that we have drive the bus on everything. And that's my job when I work with clients, is to help them change what they believe. Okay? Here's the difference between therapy and counseling. This is bonus. Okay? Counseling is single issue, skill-based, short-term. Therapy is multiple issue, thought-based, long-term. Most counselors who are traditionally trained will see somebody 12 times or less. I see people for years. Because I'm working with changing how they think. I'm working with them to change what they believe about themselves and the world around them. And that takes a lot more work. Because we don't put our pants on left leg first, most of us. Right? I do, but I'm weird. So, the beliefs that I have listed on there, when I've spent most of my career working with teenagers, those are their top 5. Top 6. These are the ones I run into the most. The top 3 are really the big ones. When I'm working with somebody and their baseline belief about themselves is that they're worthless, first that tells me there's a lot more stuff they haven't told me yet. The second thing is we got a lot of work to do, because that's a hard bugger to change. When somebody believes they're worthless, why would they come to church? When somebody believes they're worthless, why would they accept help from anybody? Why would they ask for help? If somebody believes they're worthless, why do they try hard at anything? They don't. They don't feel like they deserve it. They don't feel like they deserve good things in their life. They don't feel like they deserve friends. They don't feel like blah, blah, blah. So this next section, some of you may have heard the phrase, I just lost it. Stinking thinking. Or, that's the crass way to say it. Thinking errors, that's it. Thinking errors is what we're talking about here, okay? Notice we're talking a lot about what you think about. How many times have you sat and talked with somebody who has depression, and you noticed that the majority of their conversation was about what? Themselves. How bad they are, what medications they take, how they're feeling about things, all the bad things that ever happened to them. That's what they talk about. What are they thinking about if that's what they're talking about? All of that times 10. And the good things that have happened in their life don't get talked about very much, even though they're true. So thinking, week 5 in this series, we're going to talk about boundaries. And one of the most important boundaries you can have is a thinking boundary. And a thinking boundary is about what we allow ourselves to think. You can have self-control over your thoughts. They're not just running rampant in there. Okay? But somebody dealing with depression, their mind has raced away from them a long time ago, and they're struggling to catch up to it. Some of you are probably thinking, okay, Todd, when are you going to talk about the chemical imbalance in the brain? Right now, because it doesn't exist. In 1975, Eli Lilly put out a theory in their marketing efforts to doctors that maybe it's a chemical imbalance in the brain that our product can help with. And it was never proven. But it lodged itself in the conversation in America, and it's been the guiding principle ever since. It just never existed and still doesn't. Now, I can give you a medication that can change how your brain works. Remember the first psychiatrist I worked with last week? I told you he was 80 plus years old and his motto was better living through chemistry. Well, I call that slavery. We can give you a medication that can make you do anything we want you to do. And the APA, the American Psychiatric Association, who writes the big book that I have to use, has said publicly that they will never include anything in the DSM, Diagnostic and Statistical Manual, Volume 5, TR is the current version. They will never include anything in it that they can't give a medication for. That's what they've said publicly. And one of the biggest problems we have in this country right now is called developmental trauma disorder. It's about children. It's about trauma that happens in your childhood and how it affects you ongoing through your life if it's untreated. And it's not in the DSM because they can't give a medication for it. Do you know that seasonal affective disorder is not in the DSM? Do you know that RAD, reactive attachment disorder, is not in the DSM? If they can't give a medication for it, they're not going to put it in their precious book. Chemical imbalances, the diagnoses that are in the book. Unfortunately, the industry I work in is highly politicized, and I don't like it. There's a lot of stuff in it that I don't like. And quite honestly, it might be 10 years from now, but I might not be allowed to do what I do because I'm a Christian. And they will take what I believe and call it whatever, and they'll take my license away if I insist on continuing to do what I do the way that I do it. Maybe that happens in 10 years, maybe not. But several of us have talked about that may be coming. So, the way a person thinks about themselves is primary to the existence of depression. If you don't change their thinking, not you, me, if their thinking isn't changed, nothing's going to change. And at church, that's where you come in. The more influence you have with people, whether they're young people or older people, the more influence you have toward God's word, toward God, and toward positive thinking, the better it's going to be for them. And they will fight you in the beginning. They will fight you hard. Todd, that's great for, everybody else, but God could never forgive me. Really? You know what the Bible says about that? No, I just know that those people, my friend, this other person, whoever they're talking about, they're good people. And I know God loves them. And they don't deserve bad things in their life. But Todd, if you knew the things that I've done, if you knew the things that have happened in my life, you wouldn't like me. Well, it's a good thing I'm not here to like you. I'm here to be your therapist. But that's what they think. I hear it over and over and over on my couch. They think that God can't forgive them. Well, what do we know about that? That's not true. That's putting God in a box. And I will lay some Vegas odds that they have other problems with what the Bible says as well about themselves. Here's a kicker, though. They know the truth because they use the truth to describe their friends. They're a good person. God loves them. They don't deserve this. They know the truth, but they're not applying it to themselves for whatever reason. And that's what I have to dig into. So, let's talk about some of these. Idealistic thinking. How many of you have heard the phrase, don't should on me? That's this one. Okay, whenever you apply shoulds or oughts to a conversation, if that word is coming out of their mouth a lot, they're using this thinking error. Anytime we apply shoulds and oughts to a lot of stuff that comes out of our mouth, we're on shaky ground. Anytime we compare ourselves to others, which that's what Facebook's all about. Anytime we compare ourselves to others and set up impossible goals, what we're picturing is, I'm supposed to be a certain kind of person. I'm supposed to have a certain kind of job. I'm supposed to have a certain kind of relationship. I'm supposed to whatever. Or I should, or I oughta. Oughta is the southern version of ought. That's dangerous ground. It's not going to work because we're expecting perfection. Perfectionism runs a lot with depression. How? It started out as perfectionism and it turned into depression. It started out as, I have to be this perfect way for people to like me. I have to perform my job perfectly to get a raise, to get my boss to like me, to get my coworkers to like me. I have to be perfect in my relationships or I won't be able to have a boyfriend, girlfriend, husband, wife, children, whatever. Or my in-laws or my whatevers. It starts out as perfectionism, which is rooted in other problems, which we'll get to next week. But that perfectionism, when failed, turns into depression. Make sense? Love this one. Taking everything personally. We all know them, right? We all know people who take everything personally, or they make it about them. Personalizing everything that's going on around you is going to lead to depression. It's a natural outcome because you're just not that powerful. And if you think you are, you're delusional. You're not God. That's what this one's about. One of the ranches I used to work on with teenage girls, they always talked about taking God off the throne and putting yourself on the throne. When we think things or engage relationships in a certain way as to make ourselves the most powerful, the most important, the most whatever, we've already taken God off the throne a long time ago because it's our way. And if we apply that to relationships, they're going to fall apart. And then we find other things to blame. Well, I didn't do, it's their fault. I didn't do anything wrong. I'm a great person. They're lucky to have me in their life. What did I do? That's what we hear. Emotional reasoning. Believing our emotions are true despite facts to the contrary. There's a saying that I love. Facts don't care about your feelings. And feelings aren't always true. Just because somebody feels a certain way doesn't mean that's true. I used to work with a lot of teenage girls who had been adopted. And their line was, well, I'm the throwaway kid. I don't belong in this family. I was abandoned. I'm here in this residential facility with you, Todd, because my parents abandoned me here. Oh, really? Let's talk about what that word means. Were you found on the road? Beside the road? Were you found in a dumpster? No, your parents brought you here, dropped you off, kissed you on the forehead, and said, I love you very much, but I can't tolerate your behaviors anymore, and we need help. That's not abandonment. You can use that word if you want, but your definition's wrong. Emotional reasoning is allowing our emotions to take over, to tell us what to think. And I did my homework. Where's he at? I don't see him. He was here earlier. Let me get my phone because I looked up a couple of verses that I couldn't think of last week. He's here somewhere. Okay, the first one is Genesis 6:5, and that one talks about the hearts of man being filled with evil. Hearts of men being filled with evil. This is right around the flood. The second one is Proverbs 22:15, and that one, a loose Todd quote of that one is, the hearts of children are filled with folly all the time. Folly means foolishness. Then we have Jeremiah 17:9, Ecclesiastes 9:3, and Proverbs 28:26. The Bible tells us over and over to override our heart with our thinking. Now, it also says, guard your heart because out of it comes the springs of life. Okay? And I am not the Greek scholar. Okay, I'll leave that up to Chad tonight. But there are different words for heart in the Old Testament and the New Testament. One word for heart means this. It's actually talking about your emotions. One word for heart means this, your gut. Another word for heart means the actual organ in your chest. It's actually right here. So we have to be careful with Scripture that we don't take it a certain way when it doesn't mean that. Okay? God made us. We're wonderful machines. I'm very proud of the creation that God made, not me, but mankind. But we can get a little loopy in the way we think about things sometimes. Okay? So, don't allow your emotions to rule your thinking. That's the point of that one. Catastrophizing, worst case scenario thinking. This makes emotional reasoning look like a tiddlywink game. Okay? Catastrophizing is taking everything to the worst fear level. Okay? If I pull out of the driveway and I hear a noise coming from the engine of my truck that I've never heard before, catastrophizing would mean I got to jump out and get away from it because it's going to explode. Everything's a catastrophe. You have an argument with a boyfriend, girlfriend, spouse, or whatever, and all of a sudden it means it's over. How many of you saw that episode of Friends with Monica and Chandler when that happened? Oh, come on. Monica and Chandler on Friends had a fight. And Chandler was like, well, that's it. Relationship's over. And Monica looks at him and goes, no, it's not over. We had a fight, you numbskull. It's just a fight. But he thought it was over. Just like people with depression, one bad thing happens, they catastrophize it into everything that happens is bad. The only thing that happens in my life are bad things. It's not truth, it's not reality, it's a total fantasy, but that's what they believe. Dichotomous thinking, that's the second big word for the night. Dichotomous means one of two. This is black and white thinking. It's either this extreme or this extreme, and there's nothing in between. There are no shades of gray. I had one client, and I spent a month just working with him on shades of gray. And he would walk out of my office, down the hallway, and something he would say to a family member who was waiting for him or a stranger in the hallway would be right back to black and white thinking. And I would say, dude, shades. He's like, oh yeah, shades of gray, shades of gray. Okay. I use scales all the time, 0 to 10. It's not a 10 and it's not a 0. What is it? Well, it's a 3. Okay, you were acting like it was a 0, but it's a 3. Tell me why it's a 3. And we just work on moving it 1 or 2 points. If they come in and they're at a 9, okay, let's get it to a 7 by the time you walk out the door. It's shades of gray. Everything's a shade of gray. Selective attention. We already filter a lot of things that are happening around us. How many of you have forgotten about the noise up by the roof from the lights? Because you're paying attention to me. You've already excluded that noise from your attention. You don't need to pay attention to it. There's a lot of things that happen in our day-to-day life or in this room right now that we don't need to pay attention to. So we focus our attention on the things that we want to focus on. Well, what if we focus on the wrong things? What if we only focus on the things that are negative and we never focus on or allow ourselves to see the positives? How many times have you gotten a compliment and you didn't like it, so you didn't pay attention to it, dismissed what the person said in your head and said, well, if they really knew me, they wouldn't think that. Well, if they knew my story, they would think the opposite of that. We can find ways to get rid of a compliment. I know, because I used to do it. I love compliments now. You can give me all the compliments you want. And if you give me too many compliments, I'll say, no, really, it's Todd, not God. So selective attention happens all the time, but we only pay attention to the things that buttress our position. If somebody's depressed, they're only going to pay attention to the negatives. If somebody's manic, they're only going to pay attention to the positives. Both are reality. We're not perfect. Okay? Superstitious thinking. Attributing power to our own actions. Irrational beliefs that you can directly or indirectly influence the things going on around you, but that are outside of your control. How many of you have heard the word manifest or manifesting a lot lately? That's what that is. Ascribing power to ourselves that we do not have. I cannot make a certain thing happen in my life unless it's the food I'm putting in my mouth. I can't make a certain client show up or not show up. I can't make a certain payment from an insurance company show up or not show up. I can't make somebody sell their car at a lower price, at a ridiculously lower price than whatever. We're not in charge of that kind of stuff. We don't have that kind of control. But again, we live in a society that tells us we have a lot more power than we think we do. We can manifest things into existence. We can make this thing happen. You just got to believe, baby. Why do you think they still say that after a couple thousand years of snake oil salesmen? It's the same thing, just in a different package. It just costs a lot more now. Passivity. Well, if I can't have the job I want, I'm just not going to have a job. If I can't have the boyfriend I want, I'm just not going to have a boyfriend. If I can't whatever, then I'm not going to anything. It's passive aggressive. And if it runs in certain directions, it becomes outright manipulation. This one can lead to cycles where you go back and forth between anxiety and depression, but it creates a downward spiral, because when one fails, you go to the other one, that one fails, you go back to the other one, but at a lower point, and it's just down, 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 down. Because again, we're trying to give ourselves power we don't have. This one I kind of talked about a little bit earlier. If I do the right things, I will be worth something. My worth is predicated on my friendships, my job, my bank account, my house, my whatever. Not true, but we can convince ourselves of that. And I can guarantee you somebody living in this thinking error is going to be depressed a lot. Because what they're dealing with, again, is I have the ability to make these things happen. I should be this kind of person. Whatever. And when reality hits and the can'ts start showing up, depression's a natural conclusion. Now notice in a lot of these, the focus was on the self. And again, not on God, not on God's word, not on what Jesus has already done for us. Depression is the ultimate inward focus. When I worked at an eating disorders ranch in Arizona, we did horse therapy. And this one time I walked out to the round pen, and a teenage girl was on the horse, and she was focused on everything that was going wrong. And I said, stop focusing on the things you're doing wrong and focus on the things you're doing right. You're doing a lot of things right, but you're talking about the things that aren't going right. And as soon as she switched, the horse changed, her performance changed, and things started going right. Now, is that because she believed? No, she changed her focus. Because the things that happen in our down moments, our emotions, how they affect us physically, how they affect our brain, how they affect everything that goes along with all of that, has a trickle-down effect. It all works together or fails together. It's amazing to sit in a round pen with a horse and a rider going around you, and all you do is say, think about this, and all of a sudden the horse stops. Not because of what I said, but because of the emotion that shot through the rider's body, which the horse didn't like. This was 3 years ago, 20 degrees inside a barn working with a girl on a horse. There were 5 horses in the barn. It was a room about half this size. And there were 4 staff. And we were all standing against a wall. The other horses were on one end of the room, and the girl was working kind of in the middle to one end. And she was just riding in a circle. And all of a sudden, all of the other horses picked their head up and joined the circle and created a tornado of horses. And the horse wrangler and the staff walked out into the middle of this, crazy, walked out in the middle of this, grabbed the reins of the horse the girl was on. The girl was 14 years old, maybe 13. Grabbed the reins and yanked the horse's head down, which changed enough in the rider and the horse that all the other horses stopped dead in their tracks. Do you know why? How many of you know about or have heard of a company called HeartMath? Anybody? No. So your heart gives off a magnetic signature at 5 feet, which is why when you get within 5 feet of somebody you love, you feel different. If you go outside of 5 feet, that feeling fades. It's magnetics. Guess how big the magnetic field on a horse's heart is? 25 feet. Why? Because they're an animal of prey. They're always on guard for something wanted to take a bite out of its butt. So they're always, that magnetic signature is always out there, and if something comes into it, they know it. Because they're an animal of prey. And ours is 5 feet. Which is why when you want to cuddle a baby, if they're not colicky, they will calm down when you bring them to your chest. But if your 2-year-old is arm's length away, more than 5 feet, you've got chaos on your hands. But you bring certain ones, like one of my children, into that 5-foot zone, they start calming down. Physical affection changes everything for that child. That was a rabbit trail. Okay. How does depression affect relationships? So when somebody is depressed, their relationships are going to feel the effect of that, okay? Primarily through a lack of authenticity. They're not going to be an honest, genuine person, okay? Why? Go back to that second screen or whatever it was that said, you don't get me, you don't understand me, and you don't know how it is. That's why. Because number one, they don't think people get it, but number two, they don't want to sit there and explain it. Because again, back to emotional reasoning, if you really cared about me, you would know. How many times have we heard that? So they're going to be difficult to manage. How are you today is a loaded question. When they walk in my office and I go, how are you today? And it's somebody who's battling with depression, I'm ready for the game. It's going to be a game somehow. And, okay, we're just going to play a game. Or I'm going to go, I ain't playing games today. Tell me for real. Tell me how much it sucks. Because you lack honesty about yourself. And they, what's wrong with you today, Todd? Nothing's wrong with me. You're going to answer my question or you're getting out. Because I'm not going to play. Honesty requires a longer answer than they think the other person wants. So in other words, if I've got depression and somebody says to me, how are you today, or how's it going, or what, we're just passing each other at church or in the grocery store. How are you today? Fine, because I think they don't want to stand there for 10 minutes while I give them my sob story. So they're going to lie. Well, how's lies going to affect your relationship when they get found out? Not good, right? Because dishonesty reinforces the idea that nobody understands, and I'm not going to waste my time telling them. So why should I be honest in the first place? Which thereby leads to a deterioration in quality of friendships and relationships. Of course it does. Lying is always going to do that. And dishonesty reinforces the belief that you're a burden to other people. One of the first screens was depression is an unbearable load. Well, if it's unbearable for me, it's unbearable for them. Why would I give it to them? I don't want them to have to handle it. So I got to shoulder all this thing myself, which means now I'm isolating. Now I'm a loner. Now I don't accept help. I don't even want it. And besides, if I was honest, it would make my emotions the center of everything, and I don't want to tell people how I feel. They don't really want to know anyway, but I don't want to talk about it. I sit and think about it all day long. I mean, I'm the center of the world, aren't I? So why would I want to tell them? Because they don't really care. So I'm going to lie some more. How does depression affect our body? Well, we've already talked about part of this. Emotions are also a physical experience, not just an emotional experience. When we get depressed, it's going to have an impact on other body systems. Okay, it's going to have an impact on our brain. It's going to have an impact on our stress levels. It's going to have an impact. Y'all brought candy? Okay, we got a table with candy and a table with cookies. What's next week? Steak and potatoes? Your entire body, not just your brain, is affected by prolonged depression. Okay, and again, this is the chemical imbalance thing is off the shelf, but there are chemicals in our body, mainly hormones, that get jolted up and down based on sometimes how we feel or how stressed we are. And anybody who's depressed has elevated stress in their life. Okay? That's what I just said. So the next one's a big block. Went to a trauma conference in Boston. Oh, this was 4 or 5 years ago. One of the best conferences I've ever been to, and there was only 800 people there. Bessel van der Kolk, it was his conference. He's the leading researcher on trauma around the world, and he does a conference every May, end of May, in Boston. And one of the speakers there was a guy named Gabor Mate. Anybody heard of him? If you haven't and you have any interest in this area, go watch anything you can find by him. Gabor Mate, Gabor. Mate is M-A-T-E with the little on the E. And what he said shook me because I didn't realize it was quite all that. And all he was talking about was stress. They took cancer patients, and this was one of the studies that he quoted. They split them into 2 groups. And with the control group, they gave typical cancer drugs and treatment. And with the experimental group, they didn't give them any cancer drugs at all. All they did was teach them stress reduction techniques. The course, or the experiment ran its course. At the end of it, the control group, the cancer patients that had the cancer drugs had typical associated rates of remission and whatever with the cancer symptoms. The other group had 0 cancer symptoms. Gone. No cancer in their body. Just from stress reduction techniques. Now, what do we know about stress? The biggest stress hormone, there's like 50 of them, is cortisol. Cortisol, racing through your body, destroys body systems and organs too much stress will degrade organs and systems in your body. Okay? Week 5, we'll talk about ACEs, Adverse Childhood Experiences Study, which is explicitly about stress from childhood lasting all the way through adulthood and what it does. But what he said was stress in the body, chiefly through these hormones like cortisol, affects a lot of things. Like that's a big list. And all of that just from stress, let alone what we eat, how we think, and everything else. If you get nothing else out of this one, go learn some stress reduction techniques. Seriously. You might add years to your life. Say that again.
Where do you think is the best place to learn?
Best place to learn stress reduction techniques. You can find some stuff online. A book is not going to be enough. You're going to want somebody to teach you. So it could be a counselor or a therapist. It could be courses. You could go away to retreats and stuff, but I don't go for all the groovy stuff. It could be as simple as breathing techniques. Breathing techniques done correctly can lower a lot of things and raise a lot of other things. That's a whole nother topic. There's good. She asked about yoga. There's good and bad with yoga. I'll tell you this one. My chiropractor, who I respect highly, he was telling me about I was showing him some exercise I was doing because I busted my Achilles. I tore my Achilles 2 years ago. And so I was telling him what the PT was having me do. And he said, well, that's fine, but when you're laying on the bed, don't do both legs at the same time. And all I was doing was pulling my knee to my chest and holding it for 8 to 30 seconds. And he said, don't do both legs at the same time. And I said, what are you talking about? And he said, if you do both legs at the same time, it destroys the discs in between your whatever's in your back, your spine. And I said, okay, what about people who do yoga? He's like, yeah, they're destroying their back. And I said, really? He said, yeah, I had a yoga instructor in here one time and she was bragging about all the things she could do. And I said, yeah, you're destroying your back. She said, no, I'm not. I'm more flexible than I've ever been. Until she got the x-rays back. And he showed her how destroyed her back was. And she just couldn't feel it yet. That's a whole nother topic. Yoga is. Okay. How depression affects attention and misinterpretation of things. It will decrease your attention span. Think about it. If you're thinking about yourself and all the bad things going on in your life, how much are you paying attention to everything else going on around you? You're not. So to others, it's going to look like you're not paying attention. You are going to have a preoccupation with your own emotions, how you feel about things, and that's going to be a distraction, again, to everything else going on around you. And again, your entire body, not just your brain, is affected by prolonged depression. When you don't pay attention to what your body's telling you, our body is always giving us cues or signals as to how it feels or what's going on with us. If we're taking everything negatively and focusing inward, are we going to pay attention to those signals? No, and if we do, we're going to catastrophize them anyway. Your emotional disposition affects your cognitive interpretation. How we feel affects what we think. That's what that means. So if I feel bad about my current life and all the things going on in it, am I going to think well of other things? Probably not. How many times have you met or known somebody with depression to say they had a good day? Probably not much. Which is why the first question I ask when people walk into my office is, how you doing today? How's your day? How was your week? And I challenge them to be honest with me, because I'm looking for the good stuff, because I want to highlight it and promote it. The depressive state filters everything with cynicism, suspicion, and pessimism. If I'm depressed, nothing is allowed to be good. Life can't be that good for you. You must be lying, etc. Depression creates a lifestyle of avoidance and escape. Okay? So the easiest way to say it is, it's too much. Everything's just too much. I can't handle it all. So now I have to find ways to avoid certain things. Responsibilities, relationships, all in an effort, for me, I think I'm preserving or self-preserving, but it's actually destructive because I'm not seeing it for the truth, which results in isolation and lethargy, allowing depression to barricade your life from any outside positive influences. So the things that happen around me that are good, I don't even see them. I don't even recognize them because my depression is primary. That's what's driving the bus. Activities and relationships that would be stimulating are construed as burdens. So once again, you're alone with your pain. When somebody has depression, the hardest thing for them to do is get up and go out. Get up and go do something. And if they'll do stuff in their own home, then it's definitely not go outside or go to the store or go to the mall or whatever. Escapism is trying to check out of life in general, and the biggies are alcohol and drugs. Alcohol and drugs are escape methods, because when we imbibe in alcohol and do drugs, we are trying to exit reality. We don't want to be in reality, even for just a few minutes, because reality is too much. It's too hard, or we don't think we're good enough. So things like pornography and video games become escape objects. It's a way to exit reality and live in a fantasy world, which then tells us, well, if I can't handle the real world and I'm living through these escapism means, then I definitely can't handle the real world. And we are seeing this in epidemic levels in Gen Z right now. Their MO is, I can't. Generation Z is the latest group of kids, basically born 2001 forward. So yeah, if they're under, where are we at? If they're under 25, they're probably Gen Z. We talked about this a little bit earlier. One of the prerequisites for depression is loss of interest in things you've always done or gotten pleasure from. So depression can make it feel like the crayons in the box are all gray. You don't see colors as much anymore. One of the defining characteristics of somebody coming out of depression and recovering back into whatever you want to call it, they talk about colors. They talk about the vibrancy of colors being there that they haven't seen ever or in years. And it could be outside, it could be in an office with pictures on the wall or whatever. They see everything in shades of gray. The color, not the reality. It's one thing to be thirsty or sad, but it's another thing to be thirsty and discover that every beverage has lost its ability to quench your thirst. In other words, all the things that you've always done to have joy and fulfillment in life, they don't give you that anymore. They're either boring or defeating. And so people stop. So all the things that used to bring you pleasure now feel blah. And in many ways, this loss of pleasure, it's this loss of pleasure that is directly related to a loss of hope, which is one of the most struggling pieces of depression, is the lack of hope. Part of my job whenever anybody walks into my office is to come up with two things before they walk out the door: hope and a plan. That's my job, in addition to building some kind of relationship. Because if they don't have hope, why would they come back? If they can't see a plan or a roadmap, why would they come back? So depression makes you feel hopeless. Okay, so the first steps to recovery from depression. We're almost done. Hang with me. Balanced diet, which means less caffeine, regulating sleep, and regular exercise. My business partner and the people that we teach in our practice, we're always talking about diet, sleep, and exercise, regardless of the issue that we're working on. Diet, sleep, exercise. Diet, sleep, exercise. Because if those three areas aren't good, we probably can't expect a lot of traction. So if we can clean up their diet, help them get better sleep, and get a little bit of exercise out of them, we can start having some expectation of things going in the right direction. That's wrong. And caffeine is a part of that. Like we said earlier, caffeine it feeds depression. It doesn't help it. So coffee, even tea, sodas, of course, sugars, anything like that is not going to do you any favors with depression. Breathing, we talked about that a little bit earlier. We talked about breathing skills last time when we were talking about anxiety. In your nasal cavity, if you are stressed or overstressed or doing something really stressful and you're breathing hot, there's a temperature gauge in your nasal cavity that if that thing is running hot, your body goes into stress mode. So if you're feeling stressed, but you're not doing anything strenuous, just take a deep breath. My nasal cavity just got cooler, which turns off the stress response, which again goes back to stress reduction.
So wearing masks is bad.
Definitely. Wearing a mask is bad. Listen to your emotions with doubt, okay? When emotional reasoning talked about this a little bit, when all we do is listen to our emotions and we don't doubt them even just a little bit, then we're believing them to be true. Well, if all of our emotions are true and they're driving us somewhere, first of all, Satan's going to have a field day with that. Second of all, where are we going? Because we're certainly not in control of it. So one of the skills somebody who's depressed needs to learn is how to listen to their emotions with doubt. First of all, you just notice them. I just felt a little whatever. You don't have to do anything with it. You don't have to make it the rule. You just notice it. And then question, am I feeling this way because of this argument I just had with somebody I care about? Or am I feeling this way because I want to play victim? Just a little bit goes a long way. Obviously, don't overanalyze. Some of my clients with depression were the best overanalyzers in the world. And they could give me 9,000 ways from Sunday why what they were saying was true and what I was saying was wrong. And practice positive thinking. Again, we we can go to the negative so quickly. Anybody know what hedonistic adaptation is? That's the third big word for the night. We're done with big words. Hedonistic adaptation is something that psychology looks at and says, well, we're bent toward the negative, which means we notice the negative things faster than the positive. We'll comment on the negative things faster than the positive, which means we're going to think more negatively than positively. Here's the kicker. Maybe that's because of what happened in the Garden of Eden. We have to work to notice the positive. The negatives, they come to us like that. Maybe they're given to us by the enemy. We have to work to find the positives, to comment on the positives, to think about the positives, to focus on the positives. We have to work to do that. It's not going to come naturally to us. It is a skill that must be learned. So we have to practice it. How many of you remember the old church lady from Saturday Night Live? I'm not talking about Satan. Not that. And maybe it was a different character. The mirror. Positive affirmations. I have my clients do that all the time. Stuart Smalley. That's not the church lady. I have my clients do affirmations all the time. They struggle with it for the first 2 weeks because they don't believe what's coming out of their mouth. Guess what happens the next 2 weeks? They start believing it. I have to get them to do it first and to do it every day. But when I have them do it and they do it, it does change things. And I'm not talking about fibs or lies or convincing yourself of something that's not true. Just find something that you like, because I know it's there. And use that to get to other pieces. And when you focus even just a little bit more on the positives, it doesn't feel so bad. So we have to practice it. 2 things. I liked this quote from Helen Keller. Although the world is full of suffering, it is also full of the overcoming of it. And one day I'm going to write a book called Overcomers, which is stories from people who were depressed, who aren't depressed anymore, and how they did it. I don't know when it's going to be ready, but it'll be out there someday. No. And then this one. This is Todd's amalgamation of 2 or 3 different translations because I couldn't find the one that I liked the best. Because we know that suffering produces patience, and patience character, and character hope. Romans 5. And we need to remember that. Because notice where it starts with suffering, and notice where it ends with hope. Just like Job. So, questions? Yes. Oh, wait, I got a microphone for you.
I'm loud.
Well,
so how do you recommend regulate sleep? Because I've tried doing reading books, turning off the blue lights, everything that they tell you. I don't like medications, so I don't want to do and all of the extra, all the natural remedies that everybody's been try this, try this, try this. I cannot regulate my sleep.
2 things. Were you here last week?
No.
Okay, so one of the things I said last week is, and I talked specifically to the women about this, if you have trouble falling asleep at night and you've already been trying for 40 minutes, take your pillow and your blanket and lay on the floor. You'll be asleep in 5 minutes because it has to do with grounding, and you can't ground with a bed. I've only had one person in 16 years come back and tell me it didn't work. They might. Okay, do that. They might stay there the rest of the night. Or if they fall asleep and it's been long enough, they might crawl back up in the bed and stay asleep. The other thing, number 2, is ordeal therapy. What's something you hate to do in your house? So, okay. So when you're having trouble going to sleep and it's been more than 40 minutes, get up and do laundry. Which means if you hate it, you're not going to want to do it very long, which the only way you get to not do it is to go back to bed and go to sleep. Chloe Madonna's 1980s, wonderful stuff. Okay, next question. Yes?
I have a clarifying question in regards to the big black book, the DSM whatever, and last week's topic on anxiety, and you mentioned last week about certain pills or medication short-term help to stop some things so you can recover.
Yep.
And you didn't go there today with medication for depression. Can you clarify?
I have a love-hate relationship with medication. I said this last week. Short-term medication can do wonders to alleviate enough symptoms to allow somebody to do the work they need to do to recover. But I don't want to see anybody on medication for the rest of their life if they don't have to be. So in short-term specific applications, it can do wonderful things. It can also be misapplied in a lot of ways.
Same for depression.
Yeah, any medication, any psychotropic. Yeah. Who's next? Where? Right here, down in front. Okay, over there.
So yeah, I had a question about the chemical imbalance. Would you say people with OCD have that or not?
So again, I can give you a medication that can change a lot of chemicals in your body. You can eat certain foods that will change the chemicals in your body. You can go out and exercise a whole bunch, which will change the chemicals in your body. So there's a lot of ways to affect that equation. OCD is a version of anxiety. Same thing. There's a lot of stuff that's going to affect that. Diet, sleep, exercise is good for depression and anxiety and PTSD. Anything that we talk about, we're going to talk about those. But all of those things are going to affect those the hormones in our body as well. So would I say the same thing? Yeah.
Okay, I wanted to go back to validating the person who's depressed. Sorry. Validating the person that's depressed.
Okay.
For how long should you be doing that? Because if a person is, like, has a cycle of, like, being, like, doing this sin, getting depressed from it, like, I have a brother, has this sin, and he goes through this cycle of being manic, happy, positive all the time. Then something happens, goes to this sin, and then, so I was the person in my family who would always validate him, always listen to him, and always do the things that help him feel better and just listen. And then I had to bring up this thing that he was doing, and I got cut off. So at what point do you stop validating and start pointing to the issue?
So don't validate something that's not reality. So don't validate their delusions.
Right.
Validate reality. If they're saying it sucks to be depressed, yeah, it sucks to be depressed. So keep that juxtaposition in mind. Second thing is when they go through their cycles up and down, don't validate the roller coaster. Validate their statements that about emotions, about things that suck, about the things that they believe that aren't based in delusion. Validate those things. Don't validate the delusional thinking. Okay? And yes, it could come down to you challenging something and saying, hey, you're using a thinking error here. That's not really what's going on. They're going to get mad, and you might lose, if it's not a brother, you might lose a relationship over that. They're going to react to it. but all we can do is be the shoulder to cry on and validate their experience to the best of our ability that is in reality. But that doesn't mean everything they say gets a rubber stamp. Does that answer your question? Okay.
Changes and losses go hand in hand with getting older.
Mm-hmm.
That can be depressing.
Yep.
Always look on the bright side. What's the answer?
No, I wouldn't say always look on the bright side. It's going to be depressing to watch the people around your same age group die. That's a depressing thing. What do we focus on, though? Do we focus on the fact that our friends are no longer there? Or do we focus on what God's purpose for us in life is at that point in time? Could be our grandkids. It could be spreading God's word through missions trips. It could be any number of things. But if we're focused on not feeling good and not having the things we used to have, we're not focusing on what God wants us to be doing. Who's next? Come on, I didn't do that good of a job. Yes, right down here.
I've had chronic depressions for 70 years, and I don't feel like I feel any emotions. I mean, you say this is based on emotions.
Yeah.
But I don't get excited. I don't get particularly sad. I don't cry. I don't do any, I don't feel particularly happy. I'm not proud of what I do. And I don't know what the question is really, except that how can depression be based on emotions that you don't have? Or how can you rethink emotions that you don't have?
It's called a frozen emotional system. Frozen emotional system.
Did you just make that up?
No, I did not. My professor in grad school might have, but that's what he called it. Frozen emotional system is, imagine emotions on a continuum from extreme good to extreme bad. And when something happens in our life, when we decide, you know what, I don't want to feel that way anymore, for the equation to be balanced, if we knock something off this end, we have to knock something off this end. And on you go until there's nothing left. Yep. And so a lot of times the stuff of our past, the things that have happened in our life, have caused us to decide, I don't want to have emotions anymore, or made it where emotions were unsafe. And so we decided, for my safety and the safety of others, I can't have them anymore. I had a client that I used to work with who grew up with a father who had epilepsy. And whenever there would be heightened emotions in the house from him or his sister, his dad would have a seizure. And so Dad and Mom told them, you guys can't do that anymore because he'll have a seizure. So they didn't. And at 61 years old, he showed up in my office and said, Todd, I don't know what emotions are. I don't have them. Yet when I sat there and talked with him and he told me stories, he was one of the most emotional people I've ever met. He just didn't know how to talk about it or use it, but he was doing it all the time.
I'm curious, in these 4 types of depression, what do you find them cyclical?
They can be, or they could just be persistent.
Yeah.
The situational is probably not going to be cyclical. The seasonal affective will be. The major depressive episode is probably going to be persistent. The bipolar will be cyclical. So some of them are and some of them aren't.
So the term rapid cycling in bipolar.
Yeah, that's a bipolar thing, yeah.
Yeah.
And that's just back and forth between anxiety or mania and depression. Yeah. Wait for the mic. Oh, sorry. Take a number.
So could you address, when you said the chemical imbalance topic earlier, when they talk about generational chemical imbalances where you've got great grandpa, great uncle Henry, now grandpa, now cousin Bob, you know, where you see like with the serotonin, depression issues?
Yeah. So there is a DNA trail where you can have a parent in a generation has X number of genetic whatevers. Can those be passed on to a child? Absolutely, they can. But they're not absolutes. So if I grow up, my dad died 10 years ago, 2013. So I'm going to tell a story that's not true about my dad. If my dad was an alcoholic, and I grew up in the home of an alcoholic, watching how an alcoholic communicates, behaves, handles difficulty, treats their spouse, deals with stressful situations, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. If I grew up watching that, how am I going to act like an alcoholic? Will I ever take a drink of alcohol or not? Because that's all I know until I know different. Now, if my dad was an alcoholic before I was born and was active in that alcoholism, his DNA was affected by that when I was conceived. But if he stops drinking and alcohol is out of his system for 10 years, and then I have a brother who's born, his DNA is affected by that. We could be totally different with those predispositions because of how my father changed his behaviors. So, is it genetic? No. You will find all kinds of people saying, well, it's genetic. Your father was an alcoholic, you're going to be an alcoholic. Well, I'll tell them the story I just told. Because if I never take a drink of alcohol, am I an alcoholic? No, but if you did, you would be one. Really? So I can't go learn stuff that makes a difference in my choices. Yeah, I can. However, for something to be genetic, you have to have the genotype and phenotype. And they have not found that for alcoholism. They will say that they have found markers that will be predecessors or predeterminants, but they can't point to a specific gene. So chemical imbalances, same thing. If I grow up in a home with an alcoholic, I'm watching how all that's happening, and I'm setting my body chemistry up to act that way because I'm going to mimic it by the time I'm 5 anyway, behaviorally. So I'm already affecting the chemistry in my body to mimic my dad's in the story, which we would call, alcoholism by heredity or something? But what was that? Definitely role modeling. But that's how you can put things together that look genetic, but it's not genetic. It just looks that way because of all these pieces that are in place. You mess with any of those pieces, it changes the equation. Does that answer your question? Depression, anxiety. You can have, let's say a mom has PTSD and the kid is homeschooled, but the PTSD is set off or triggered every day. What's the kid going to act like by the time they're 14 years old? They're going to act like they have PTSD, even though nothing's ever happened to them. Who's next?
On the triangle.
Okay.
So do they all kind of feed off of each other, like thinking?
It's always in the counterclockwise motion. So thinking, feeling, behaving. Thinking,
Okay,
feeling,
'cause
behaving.
I thought later you said the way we feel affects our thinking.
It can on the backside of it. So it's not that we sit here and we have a thought and that affects our thinking. Well, before we had the feeling, we had a thought because we had to have something we were thinking about to have a feeling about.
Okay.
And then if we once we do something, then we just cycle again.
Okay.
Yeah.
I just have a question on your thoughts on EMDR.
Wonderful stuff.
Is there anybody in the valley that does it?
Tons of people.
Oh, really?
But you got to pick right.
Okay. Well, start naming people.
Anybody who works for me that's been trained in EMDR was trained right. EMDR is eye movement desensitization and reprocessing. It's wonderful stuff. It has to do with how your brain works and stores information and the speed at which it works. The analogy that's often used is if I sit here and do talk therapy with my client, it's like we're walking next to a set of train tracks and we're going from point A to point B, and that could take 2 years, 7 years, however long it takes. EMDR is the train going speeding by. It just gets there a lot faster because it moves at the speed of your brain, not the speed of your lips. It's wonderful stuff. It's helped me. I've used it to benefit with clients. The caveat is you got to pick right. So the EMDRIA sanctioned training is a 3-day per level training. There are a lot of people, unfortunately, here in the Valley who went to a 1-day, no practicum training, and they're using it, and they don't know what they're doing. Yeah, so the 3-day is level 1, then another 3-day is level 2, and then if you want certified, it's like 30 plus hours after that. You want somebody who is trained that way.
And it stands for what?
EMDR stands for eye movement desensitization and reprocessing. It has to do with moving things back and forth so that your brain bounces, and it speeds up your brain so that you process stuff a lot faster.
What kind of things does it help?
Anything. It was originally developed for Iraq war vets coming back. Maybe not originally, but that was the first prominent thing it was used with, was Iraq war vets and PTSD. And now it's available for everything. Right there.
So I have a question in response. If you are dealing with someone with depression and you tend to be the enemy or perceived, what would be the healthy and good response?
From you to the person with depression? Depends on the situation and the person. There's too many variables. Best thing you can do is, like we were talking about earlier, validate what you can that's in reality and be there for them. It's not going to be your job to fix them, to help them get over it. They're not going to want that anyway. They struggle enough with me with that. And oftentimes as family members with loved ones who have depression or could be anything else, we see them hurting so much, we just want them to get better. But we have to recognize the limitations of what we're able to do for them. You don't have a master's degree and X number of hours of training and specified skills and blah, 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 for 26 years. Your job is to love them, be a light whenever you can, validate what you can that's in reality, and that's the end of your job. So there might be specific things that you could say. I just don't have enough information. Yes?
So I got somebody in my life who has kind of completely isolated themselves, and it seems that they're in a self-perpetuating downward spiral. How do I reach out to that person? Or what do I need to do to just let them know that I am there for them?
Have you tried anything yet?
I've tried talking to them, but they just lock themselves in their room. And I don't want to tell them, hey, you need to do this. I've just Hey,
Yeah.
how are you doing? Go straight in their room.
Would they go out to eat with you?
No.
Would they eat pizza if you ordered it in?
They would take it into their room.
Are you allowed to go with them?
I haven't considered that before.
You could ask them, order some food and say, hey, can we just catch up and see if that works. Depending on where they're at and what they're doing, they might just be in a place where they're shutting everybody out. And if that's the case, there's nothing you can do. Be encouraging when you can, when they walk from the bedroom to the bathroom, try to engage them in conversation. There's probably very little you can do. But if you can get them to engage in a meal or over a cup of coffee or go for a walk or sit on the porch, something where you can start having a conversation. If you can get them into a conversation, don't tell them what to do. Ask them how they're doing and get them talking. Because the whole thing with EMDR is you want the brain to speed up. Because a lot of the stuck parts of people's lives, their brain is just slowed way down. And if you can get their brain to speed back up, they'll start processing and go, wait a minute, that's not true. And they'll break through some things on their own that way. So the more you can get them talking, the better. Wait for the Mike, not Mark.
Is tapping to do with the EMDR? Is that something separate? And if it's not, does it work?
There is a version of EMDR that uses tapping, and usually you have what we call buzzies, little things that vibrate in your hands, or you can do it by tapping on people's knees. There's all kinds of ways to do it, but there is a version of tapping for EMDR. Yes. Way over there.
So you mentioned earlier about rates of depression across different age groups and how it's highest in the little kiddos under teenage age. Could you speak a little bit about what you would consider the etiology of that to be, and also how we as parents, grandparents, and a community can help children kind of process their emotions to help prevent depression later in life?
So anytime you're dealing with kids, it's got to be age-appropriate language, because they're not going to understand big words. Etiology of that's a big word. We weren't supposed to use any more big words. Etiology basically means why does something exist? It could be difficulties at home, could be something that somebody said to them, could be bullying, could be any number of things. And what they're doing is isolating their thoughts inside themselves. So they're not telling people about it. They're not talking to their friends about it. They're not talking to their family about it. They're not talking to anybody that could help them with it or protect them. And so for whatever reason, they think they've got to handle it all on their own, which could be kind of the unspoken rules of the house that they grew up with maybe. Maybe their family doesn't do a whole lot of emotional conversation. Maybe their home doesn't allow emotional expression. It's amazing to me how many kids, even today, will say, I'm not allowed to feel anything at home. I'm not allowed to talk about how I feel about stuff. I'm just supposed to be quiet or whatever. So again, there's a lot of factors that could affect that. And again, the answer is getting them to talk about it. The more they can talk about it and people can hear them and they can feel like they're not the only ones that know it or carry it, the better. Well, it's 8 o'clock right now. Let's do 2 more questions.
So, I have a question about, you said that, how long does the long depression last? Years of, how long does that take usually?
It's different for every person. It could be, situational stuff could be as short as a couple weeks to a couple months, whereas longer term major depression could be years or decades. Okay, bring one right over here. Last one. Okay, fine. We'll do 2 more.
Mine should be quick. The EMDR, the way you spoke of that, would you, because I talked to you about the hypnotherapy and the different training, can you touch on that the same way you did the EMDR so that I can understand that better?
So
and what it is?
hypnotherapy, I was trained in hypnotherapy. I have not used it a lot. Hypnotherapy, Ericksonian hypnosis would be the best version of it, I think. And it has to do with how we basically make suggestions to ourselves. When I was trained in hypnotherapy, we had to basically have it done to us. And so my partner did it to me and I did it to her. And I picked, at the time, this was 15 to 20 years ago, I had stress knots in my back. I got these little balls of knots right under my shoulder blades. And I had them for a couple years, and I wasn't worried about them, but they were really painful. And just sitting in a chair wrong would make them flare up. And so I picked that as my issue to work on. She asked me a bunch of questions, 20 minutes, one session, 20 minutes. I came out of it, opened my eyes, and I went, they're gone. Seriously, they were gone. No physical pain whatsoever for a year. A year later, I was sitting in my chair and I went, haven't felt that in a long time. And I walked down the hallway to Nancy's office. I said, hey, Nancy, I got a stress knot in my back. And she said, I've been wondering when this was going to happen. Come in, sit down. I was like, okay. Turns out one of the suggestions she gave me was about teams, because my dad was a college basketball coach, and I understand team methodologies really well. So she used that suggestion, and in that year in between, one of our people had left and a new therapist came in. We had 5 therapists, basketball team. And one had left and we got a new one in, and I didn't trust her yet. And so I started developing a stress knot. And so when she told me all that, I went, oh, okay, I get it. I went back to my office, put myself under, took out the team suggestion and put God in its place, and I haven't had a stress knot in 15 years. That's hypnosis, done right. It's just suggestion about how we talk to ourselves inside. Hypnosis is wonderful stuff if you do it right, just like EMDR is wonderful stuff if you do it right. It doesn't work for everybody, and it doesn't work all the time, but when it does, it's amazing. Last one.
Well, this doesn't have to be a long one. You made the statement that the church can definitely have more influence toward God's word and positive thinking, and how important that is. So I'm hoping that when we are attending all of these things that we can have, I don't have a sense yet how that might happen.
In specific to depression?
Well, no, I'm just thinking in the overall, the mental health, that because you had commented earlier with all of our signing up for this, the interest that the church should be considering in giving much more attention to mental health. So, and that's a very general question.
So I'll give you the medium-sized answer. How many times on a Sunday, when we're after service out in the lobby, and we know that somebody's struggling with anxiety, depression, PTSD, or whatever, and we see them, and we can see it on their face, and maybe we've talked to them about it before, but this time we don't go up to them and say anything because of whatever reason. Got a hot date for lunch, got to go here and do this, do that, do whatever. We're talking to somebody else, we get distracted, whatever it is. But how often does that happen? Which is one more time that they didn't get what they needed when they came to church. Jesus came to heal the sick. He didn't come for the well. Jesus came to help us in our moments. We're supposed to be like Jesus. We should be helping others in their moments. And I think part of it is the stigma that mental health carries with it has infected the church so that we just go, that's not for us to handle. They have a problem with God and they need to go to counseling, or they don't go to counseling and they just need to fix their thing with God. Which part of that may be true, but we're still part of the equation and we need to go up to that person and talk to them. It absolutely starts with us, yeah. If we're not reaching out to people, we're not being the church to them. Especially when we can see it on them. Yeah. All right, thank you guys. Let me say a little bit about next week. Next week we're going to talk about trauma and PTSD. I said at the beginning that this topic tonight might be a little bit triggering. Next week will be like times 4. Okay? And I'm not saying don't come because of that. I'm saying be aware of it. Okay? Like I said earlier, a lot of depression and anxiety begins with long ago trauma. And the depression and anxiety is the current day outplay of the symptoms of PTSD. But we're going to talk about a lot of that next week. So I hope you come. We'll see you then, and I hope they bring more cookies and more candy.